They believed they knew the entire family history. Every photograph on the wall seemed to confirm the perfect life everyone wanted to show. Laughter, hugs, memories, everything seemed to be in its rightful place. But there were silences, small details no one dared question, a lost look in the middle of the conversation, a name never mentioned, a sense that something remained hidden in the shadows of the past. It was then, in a simple spiritualist meeting, that a blank sheet of paper became a bridge between two worlds. The pen ran swiftly across the lines, guided by invisible hands. Each written word carried not only solace, but also a truth buried for decades. A psychographed letter that not only brought messages of love, but revealed secrets that no one had ever dared to confess. Secrets capable of shaking certainties, dividing hearts, and forever transforming the destiny of that family. And from that moment on, nothing would be the same again. It was a seemingly ordinary family. The simple house, with pale walls already marked by time, seemed to hold in every corner the echo of stories that had spanned generations. The floor creaked under the children's hurried footsteps, as if it had witnessed laughter, running, and even silent tears. In the main room, photographs arranged in crooked frames revealed smiles frozen in time. They were images of birthdays, weddings, baptisms, portraits that, at first glance, conveyed only joy. But if you looked deeper, you could see an enigmatic gleam in some of their eyes, almost as if they held unspoken feelings, pent-up emotions, and secrets kept under lock and key. The family patriarch, a man with hands calloused from hard work, carried a seriousness on his face that often hid a discreet tenderness. He was respected, admired, but also feared at times, not for his harsh words, but for the long, dense silences he left hanging in the air when something bothered him. Silences no one dared break. The mother, on the other hand, was a beating heart within the home. A woman of unwavering faith, she found strength in daily prayer. She was the one who kept the flame of hope alive, even when life seemed to close in on difficulties. For her children, her presence was like a safe haven. Her sweetness, a relief in the face of uncertainty. There was unity, there was love, but there were also silences no one dared decipher. Small, almost imperceptible gestures that suggested not everything had been said. A glance averted at the wrong time, a curt reply in the middle of a conversation, a letter kept in a drawer, always locked, never mentioned. These details, though seemingly trivial, carried stories that were never told. And as happens in so many families, the apparent harmony was sustained by memories carefully chosen to be remembered, while others were consigned to oblivion, as if they had never existed. And it's at this point that the story begins to unfold, because no matter how hard we try to hide secrets, they always find a way to surface. Sometimes in a slip of memory, in a misplaced word, other times through an unexpected reunion. But for this family, the revelation would come in an even more surprising way, through a medium in a psychographed letter. Think for a moment. What if a deceased loved one could speak to you today? What would they say? What advice would they offer? What secrets kept during their lifetime would finally be revealed? For Maria Clara, the eldest daughter, this possibility arose in a moment of profound grief. Her father had passed away suddenly, leaving a void impossible to fill. Grief spread through the house like a shadow, covering every laugh, stifling every hope. And it was in this context of longing that she approached the Spiritist doctrine. She sought comfort, sought answers, sought the certainty that life does not end with death. She attended meetings, listened to stories from mediums, and her heart, previously hardened by grief, began to open to the possibility of reunions, until, on a seemingly ordinary night, something extraordinary happened. The setting was simple. Chairs lined up, soft lighting, prayers said in hushed tones. But in the air was a different energy, an anticipation that made hearts race. When the medium began to write, Maria Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The words flowed quickly, as if someone invisible dictated each letter, and deep in her soul, she sensed, this message would not be like the others. It was as if the silence that had hung over his family, kept for so many years, had finally found a voice that came from beyond life, but carried the weight of the choices made on earth. And that's how it all began. But before we reveal what was written in that letter, stop for a moment and put yourself in her shoes. If you received a message today from a loved one who has passed away, a letter written by a medium, what would you feel? Relief? Hope? Or perhaps fear of what might be revealed? Because that night, Maria Clara discovered that some truths cannot remain hidden forever, that there are secrets that travel through time, cross invisible borders, and reveal themselves at the exact moment we need to face them. And what was about to be revealed would change not only her life, but the fate of her entire family. Brace yourself, because what follows isn't just a story of longing. It's a story of revelation, mystery, and, above all, transformation. With his father's unexpected departure, the silence grew even deeper. The house, once so alive with laughter and conversation, now seemed to echo only with absence. Family gatherings no longer held the same joy. The empty space at the table was impossible to ignore. Every everyday detail became a painful memory. The chair that remained in the corner, the antique clock he so carefully cared for, the deep voice that could no longer be heard. Grief descended upon the home like a slow, dense shadow. It wasn't just the absence of a physical presence, but the weight of an unexplained goodbye. Words left unsaid, hugs postponed, conversations never held. This emptiness gnawed at each person differently, but for Maria Clara, the eldest daughter, the pain seemed unbearable. It was during this period of fragility that she first heard about psychography. A friend, noticing her suffering, invited her to participate in a spiritualist meeting. Until then, Maria Clara had only a silent faith, nourished by the prayers she had learned from her mother. But faced with pain, her heart opened to seek answers in something greater. That night, sitting among strangers, she listened to stories from people who had also lost loved ones. Stories of reunions, of messages that came through mediums, bringing comfort, hope, and even revelations. Her heart, heavy with longing, began to fill with anticipation. What if it were possible? What if her father could really send a message? Driven by this flame of hope, Maria Clara began attending the meetings. With each meeting, her faith grew. She felt she wasn't alone, that there was something beyond what met the eye. She sought comfort in the words that came from the invisible, but what she didn't imagine was that, amidst the words of affection and relief, something would emerge that would change not only her life, but the fate of her entire family. It was a seemingly ordinary Saturday night. The room was softly lit, and the respectful silence created an almost sacred atmosphere. The medium, serene, began the prayer. Maria Clara closed her eyes, trying to contain the anxiety that tightened her chest. As the pencil began to glide across the paper, she felt a deep shiver. The medium's hands moved quickly, as if guided by something greater. The sound of graphite scratching the paper filled the room like a silent melody, word after word, sentence after sentence, until, finally, the message was complete. With trembling hands, Maria Clara received the letter. She read each line in silence, recognizing her father's tenderness and manner of speaking in the words. There were expressions only he used, memories of moments known only to the family. There was no denying it. It was him. But amidst the words of comfort, love, and encouragement for unity, an unexpected revelation emerged. The father confessed, from the other side of life, something he had never had the courage to say in life. Before he got married, he had a son, a young man who had grown up without knowing his true origins, without ever imagining he was part of that family. The shock was immediate. Maria Clara's heart raced. How could she accept that this truth had been hidden for so many years? How could she deal with the idea of having an unknown brother hidden by her father's silence? When the news spread, the family's reaction was devastating. Some simply didn't believe it. They said it was nothing more than a fabrication, that it could simply be a suggestion from the medium's mind. Others, however, were outraged. How could they accept that such a profound, transformative truth would only come to light after death? Heated arguments raged through the home. Some wept with indignation, others with sadness. The dejected mother felt the pain of seeing her husband's image transformed by a secret revealed too late. The siblings were divided between disbelief and curiosity. Maria Clara, however, remained silent. Within her, there was a certainty she couldn't explain. Something told her those words were real, that they weren't made up or mistaken. Her gaze, fixed on the letter, seemed to penetrate the lines and reach her father's heart, now in another dimension. And it was in this inner silence that she asked herself the question that would change everything. If the message is true, where is this brother? Is he still alive? Will he ever know the truth? This doubt became a flame within her, a flame that burned, not with revolt, but with searching. Maria Clara began to feel that the secret, painful as it was, had reached them for a greater reason, and deep down, a certainty began to emerge. Nothing happens by chance. Dramatic pause, music swells softly because, if life is responsible for hiding certain truths, time, sooner or later, is responsible for revealing them. And that revelation was just the beginning of a journey that would forever change the bonds of that family. The family was divided. For some, the psychography was a divine consolation, a chance to feel that their father was still present, watching over them from the other side of life. For others, it was nothing more than a delusion, a cruel lie created by the pain of grief. It was difficult to accept that such a profound secret had been revealed after his death and not while he was still among them. Arguments were inevitable. Some wept with anger, others with relief. The family, once united by the same suffering, now split into opposing opinions. Each reacted according to their beliefs, their wounds, and how they viewed their father. But Maria Clara remained silent. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply held in her heart a certainty she couldn't explain. Something inside her, perhaps intuition, perhaps a spiritual bond with her father, told her those words were true. And it was this silent faith that kept her steadfast in the following days, until, unexpectedly, the impossible happened. It was an ordinary afternoon, with a gray sky, when someone knocked on the door. The dull sound of the knocking echoed through the house as if carrying an invisible weight. Maria Clara opened the door, and before her stood a young man with a downcast but intense gaze. He bore a familiar, almost familiar surname. His facial features immediately caught their attention. There was an unmistakable resemblance to his father in his eyes, an expression reminiscent of the gestures they had seen so often. Silence took over the room. With a broken voice, the young man explained that he had come in search of answers. He carried within him a pain he had never been able to explain, the pain of not knowing his true origins. His entire life, he had grown up feeling a void, an absence he couldn't quite pinpoint. And recently, subtle clues had emerged, leading him to that house, to that moment. Maria Clara felt her heart race. She needed no further proof. Here was the brother the letter had revealed. At that moment, there was no denying it. The father's spirit had spoken the truth. On the other side of life, he had had the courage to confess what he had never been able to reveal in life. And now, that family had to deal with the reality that was thrust upon them. The impact was devastating. Some members rejected it outright, refusing to believe the connection. "It's a coincidence," they said. "This is nothing but wishful thinking." Others watched in silence, tears in their eyes, unable to deny the obvious similarity. The mother, especially, suffered the most. Her heart was torn between the pain of discovery and the call for forgiveness. How could she accept that her husband, her companion of so many years, had kept such a deep secret? How could she open her heart to a son who wasn't hers, but who now stood before her eyes, asking only for recognition? The boy, for his part, demanded nothing but the truth. He sought neither inheritance nor titles. He simply wanted to understand where he came from, who the father he had lost was, and why he had grown up on the margins of a history that was rightfully his. Maria Clara felt, once again, that destiny was being guided by something greater. There was no escaping the revelation. The encounter was no coincidence. It was life showing that secrets don't stay buried forever. And faced with that truth, each member of the family would have to make a choice, reject or accept. The hours that followed were filled with intense silence and reflection. The boy, sitting at the table, shared fragments of his story, a childhood marked by unanswered questions, a youth lived with the constant feeling of incompleteness. Each story was like a mirror that painfully reflected his father's absence. As he spoke, Maria Clara remembered the words of the psychographed letter. Now everything made sense. Her father hadn't revealed anything during his lifetime out of fear, perhaps shame, perhaps not wanting to hurt those he loved. But on the other hand, he sought to repair the silence, to pave the way for the truth, even if it cost tears and anger. The mood in the house was heavy, but there was also something new in the air: opportunity. The opportunity to transform pain into reconciliation, lies into truth, separation into unity. And although it was difficult, Maria Clara knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge wasn't accepting the revelation, but learning to live with it, rebuilding bonds, and making room for forgiveness. Because when the truth imposes itself, there's no turning back. The only thing left to decide is, will we deny it to the end, or will we embrace it as a path to healing? The fate of that family was about to be decided, and every choice from that moment on would have eternal consequences. Over time, anger gave way to understanding. What had once been pain, distrust, and rejection began to blossom into a seed of acceptance. The house, which had previously echoed with arguments and tears, slowly became a space for dialogue, still timid, but filled with a deep desire for peace. Maria Clara was one of the first to notice the change. It was as if her heart had gradually found a new rhythm. She understood that her father's revelation had not come to destroy, but to rebuild. That the truth, even painful ones, always sets you free. It was then that, during one of her nightly readings, she remembered a phrase that had deeply marked her soul, taken from the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. You cannot deceive your conscience, which is the most severe and impartial judge. These words echoed like a beacon in his mind. His father, even from the other side of life, was seeking reparation. He hadn't shied away from his responsibility, hadn't tried to hide the secret forever. On the contrary, he had returned through psychography to bring the truth to light, so that, somehow, the family could heal old wounds and find themselves again. The presence of that new brother, once rejected, began to be seen in a different light. What had once seemed a threat now revealed itself as an opportunity. The chance to love beyond the boundaries of blood, to reach out and embrace someone who, for their entire life, had been denied belonging. The seemingly impossible reunion slowly turned into reconciliation. Every conversation, every gesture, every shared glance built a bridge between past and present. What silence had destroyed, truth now began to restore. It wasn't easy. Forgiveness didn't come overnight. There were tears, there were arguments, there were sleepless nights when each family member had to face their own inner demons: hurt, pride, fear of judgment. But little by little, something greater took over, the desire to no longer remain a slave to pain. And that's how forgiveness, still difficult, began to blossom. First, as a shy, almost invisible sprout, then, like a tree that took root deeper and deeper in everyone's hearts. In that home, pain gave way to understanding. What was once an unbearable burden became a learning experience. What seemed like a tragedy became a path of healing. Maria Clara then understood that life doesn't end with death. That love is an invisible thread that crosses dimensions, that connects hearts, and that, sooner or later, always finds its way again. The new brother, previously a foreigner, gradually integrated into the family routine. He shared meals, stories, and memories he hadn't experienced, but which now rightfully belonged to him. His pain at not having known his father and life was softened by the welcome he was finally beginning to receive. And the mother, who had suffered so much, found strength in the faith that had always guided her steps. She cried, yes, she cried for her husband's silence, for the pain of having been deceived, but she also cried for the opportunity to transform that suffering into something greater, expanded love. Little by little, she began to see her new son not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that the human heart is capable of forgiveness and a new beginning. In this process, everyone learned that family ties go beyond flesh and blood. They are spiritual bonds built over many lifetimes, strengthened by trials, pain, and reunions. And in the silence of the night, Maria Clara often felt her father's presence, not in the form of a shadow, but as a gentle energy, a breath of awareness that seemed to say, "Thank you." It was as if he, on the other side, had finally found peace. For he knew that his family, though hurt, had chosen the path of forgiveness. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of this story, understanding that the truth can hurt, but it can also heal. That secrets, when revealed, come not to destroy us, but to teach us. Because, in the end, life isn't about perfection, but about new beginnings. And each new beginning is an opportunity to love more, to forgive more, to evolve more. And so, in that home, where the silence of pain had previously reigned, the sound of hope began to reign. Dramatic pause, music rises and slowly dissolves. But what does fate have in store for this family? What other trials will life bring? And how will each of them deal with the paths that lie ahead? Time, always time, will tell. Time has shown that psychography did not come to destroy, but to liberate. Every word written in that psychographed letter penetrated not only the paper but also the invisible walls that separated hearts within that family. And it was in this process that everyone understood. The truth, when revealed, often hurts, but it also opens doors to learning, healing, and a new way of living. For months, the memory of that Saturday night returned repeatedly to Maria Clara, the moment when the medium, guided by forces no human eye could see, revealed not only a secret, but an opportunity for transformation. There, in the initial shock, no one imagined it would be the beginning of a path of reconciliation that would span generations. The family gradually understood that love is not bound by human conventions, but by the eternity of the spirit. Blood may unite, but it is the spiritual bond that sustains and strengthens. The new brother, who had previously arrived at the door with insecurity and pain, became a living part of the family's history, not as a reminder of a hidden past, but as a sign that truth can build bridges where before there were only chasms. Every tear shed was, in some way, converted into a seed of reconciliation, of humility, of hope. And these seeds, watered by time, blossomed into understanding, dialogue, and, above all, forgiveness. Because, as Spiritist doctrine teaches us, life goes on. Death is not the end, but merely a passage, a return to a greater home, where souls meet, recognize each other, and continue their journey. And in the reunion of souls, forgiveness is always the greatest victory. How many times do we remain silent in life, believing that by hiding our pain and mistakes, we'll be protecting those we love? But sooner or later, the truth finds its way out. And when it comes to light, it reveals not only the weight of the mistake, but also the chance to start over. This was the legacy of the father of that family, to understand, even on the spiritual plane, that he could not move on in peace without first making amends. He could not do so in life, but he found in psychography the opportunity to reach out from the other side, to bring light to the darkness of silence. And the family, in accepting this revelation, understood something even greater, that true love does not judge, condemn, or exclude. True love welcomes, transforms, and renews. Dramatic pause, soft, hopeful soundtrack in the background, and you, who heard this story, may also carry silences. Perhaps there are unspoken truths in your life, hidden pain, postponed forgiveness. What this story teaches us is that it's never too late to begin again. That, even if life ends, the spirit lives on, and there will always be an opportunity for reconciliation. But what if we could avoid the pain of silence now? What if we chose to speak, to forgive, to embrace while we still have time? This is the great reflection. It is better to reveal the truth in life with courage and love than to let the weight of silence become a wound for those who remain. Because, in the end, what truly remains are not the mistakes, but the way we choose to repair